Okay, Tom Hirons, welcome to the listening.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. So where are you calling in from today?
I am in South Devon, not far from Totnes, not far from Dartington, a little bit southwest of a local hill called Yarna Beacon, which is quite a landmark here and seems like a good place for a storyteller to live. It's a lovely hill. I was just out observing it just now and how its silhouette changes through the seasons. We're approaching the time of year when it has its just best silhouette. It's just totally iconic. It's beautiful. But yeah, South Devon is where I am.
So what is it about that place? Because it's clearly there's a big gravity there. I was just in Dartington. I did Martin Crawford's Forest Garden course in the summer.
Ah, nice.
So I was down there for a weekend, and I've been to Totnes a few times and sort of around that area, or up on the moor a bit as well. What do you think it is about that area that's kind of pulling people in?
Well, um, there's a number of things. I mean, I moved to this general area about 11 years ago, having lived in Scotland for 20 years. But I was brought up in East Anglia. And when I was living in Scotland, by the time I was done there, I was absolutely certain that I would never live in England again because it's so crowded and so full of keep out, no trespassing signs, and regarded it basically as a kind of extended grey cloud of suburbia. And then when I met the now mother of my children, Rima Staines, the artist, she was living in northeast Dartmoor, and I came down to see her. And I had never been to Dartmoor, growing up in East Anglia. I had no reason to come here. And encountering that place, those kind of 365 or whatever square miles of what passes for something approaching wilderness in the south of England just completely blew my mind. And it was like encountering some moss entangled, granity, twisted oak, hawthorny, stream bubbling beast that still consumes people every so often, literally. And I realized, okay, I can do this. I can live around here so long as I'm on the moor or not far from it. This creature and I are going to have some kind of relationship. So that, the moor is a presence, that radiates beyond its borders. And so we're still touched by that here, even though we're, 5-10 miles, however far it is, from the actual edge of the moor. But then you've got this little strange place around here, Totnes and Dartington, and all these little, so many little things going on in this area. And this part of Devon, like a lot of Devon, is very folded. There's a lot of nooks, a lot of crannies, a lot of valleys and hills, and so there's a lot going on, kind of hidden away from view if you don't know where to look. But then this particular locality, we have Dartington. So for those who don't know, it's a big country estate where an art school basically was set up, a kind of rural school of the arts that ran for many years, and that has changed the whole flavor of this area. And I think it's fair to say that that's probably the biggest influence on this particular locality. And whilst that school doesn't run anymore, there's still a lot that goes on at Dartington, as you know, and Schumacher, the college there. And so there's a creative subculture that has developed momentum around here, and just all sorts of interesting things, whether they're creative or kind of activisty in various ways, or just alternative living. There's a lot going on here. And when I was up on the moor, we always used to be pretty rude about Totnes as kind of, Devon's Glastonbury. And we'd come down and be like, oh, this is just a freak show. But actually living closer to it now, I have had to eat my words, as I so often do. And actually, there are a lot of good things, a lot of good people down here. And certainly with 2 young children, it's an extraordinary place to bring up children as well. So there's all sorts of things. And the land itself around here is fascinating in all sorts of kind of mythic and geological ways. There's just a lot.
Yeah, it's something I wonder about the Dartington thing. It's clearly the river is the base reason. I think it's like where the moor communicates, or kind of it sends its sort of blood down into the valley there, and it's like
Totally,
that's
yeah.
the interface or something, like the human interface with the moor.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, and shame on me for not mentioning the Dart, which is just this extraordinary river that I'm still developing a relationship with. Is so different from the other river that I know well on the moor, which is the Tean, which is further up and then goes east, which is a very different kettle of fish altogether. But the Dart is just kind of gold, really.
It's such an incredible river. I only know it a little bit, but what exposure I've had, it has such a presence.
Absolutely. We lived briefly up on the High Moor, just outside Dartmeet, which is where the east and the west Dart meet. And that area is something else again. It's just extraordinary. I just utterly love it up there. And I wrote a lot of half decent work, kind of sitting on the banks of the Dart. It's a great place.
Yeah, we sort of did a bit of wild camping. Is it called Huckabee? Is there a tiny little hamlet called Huckabee? Just sort of somewhere up there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So beautiful. We were sort of dipping in the water every morning. Amazing. And it feels like it could be any time in history when you're there. To me.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about the moor endlessly, and the power that it has over me, and my kind of practice really, or my main worship really, is to go and pay my respects to the moor and try my best to have some kind of conversation with it, which usually involves me listening with my blunt, ill-tuned ears, trying to catch little snippets of what it's saying to me, and then writing around them. But it's alive. It's a really strong place. It's not always comfortable, and this is part of what I like about it. There are areas of the moor which are just so pokey and odd, and there are other places that feel, kind of much more simply elven in some ways. And
how did you find your way to relating like this to a place? Is this something that you had experiences of very early on in life that kind of gave you the keys to that?
It's hard to say. I don't know. I only have my own experience, really, but I have fallen deeper and deeper in love with the experience of knowing a piece of land as I've got older. I grew up rurally in East Anglia, in the Waveney Valley, not far from a place called Bungay, which you probably know because you're not that far from there. And so I spent my time, a lot of the time exploring the local woods and straying for miles and miles across the fields into the kind of spinneys and copses that there are there, mining for coal in the clay riverbanks of the Waveney, and doing all the things that are good to do when you're a kid. And so I knew what it felt like, I guess, to be in a place and to see it changing, and to have some sense of, okay, my footsteps are okay on this land, and we have I wouldn't have put it in those terms, but to have a relationship. And then moving up to Scotland, I moved up to Scotland when I was 17, and spent most of the next 20 years there, and had a much more complex relationship with that land, being English, being part of a culture that had colonized and decimated and traumatized that whole place. And so there was a lot of inquiry about what is my place in this land. So I would, in my better times, I would go out and I'd explore and make pilgrimage to particular places in Scotland. But I suppose really, for most of my younger life until my I don't know when, 30 or something like that, late 20s, I was really on a kind of cosmic escape. I was ascendant, I was rising up, all the things that could essentially bring me out of my body and shoot me off into the universe. I was into all of them. And then one fateful year, about, I don't know, 17 years ago or something like that, I came across this thing of the Wilderness Rites of Passage, or the Wilderness Vigil, as we tend to call it these days, or Vision Quest as it was known then. And being a young man growing up in this culture, I was starting to feel the lack of any kind of initiatory experience into adulthood, or any kind of marking of that, and observed it as a missed need, I suppose, in myself. And when I came across this thing, I leapt at the chance to do it, and that turned me upside down and basically kind of planted my head in the leaf mold and the humus and bird shit and badger droppings, and started really orienting me downwards into the ground. And I think that was probably the key thing, and everything changed after that. So all my writing suddenly became a lot more land focused rather than this spinning off into the cosmos. I blame that for drawing me back from the stars.
So what can you speak a bit more about what happened? As much as is kind of all right to speak about, that made that switch from being up here to down there.
For sure. It was very simple in a way. I went out as a young man, going out to do the Wilderness Vigil, which is 4 days and nights in this case, of being alone without any food, just drinking water with just a tarp for shelter in the kind of foothills of Snowdonia in Wales. And when I went out, I was full of beautiful, wonderful grandiosity about my expectations. I was really, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fast and pray, and I will wrestle angels, and a scroll will be handed down from the clouds with my life's instructions on, and maybe I'll get a new name. And I was my idea of vision was very, very visual. That's all I had to go on. It's like, I'm seeking visions. And so when I went out under the tutelage of a guy called David Wendelberry, and actually Martin Shaw in the end, through a strange twist of fate, who's a friend and neighbor not so far from here now. I went out with all these notions, and I found the place where I was going to have my vigil, which was this beautiful oak glade. It was a sunny day, and it was perfect. And then as soon as I went out, the morning we went out, it started raining. And this beautiful glade transformed into a sodden, stinking, mushy, kind of just horrific birth canal that stank of death. There was a dead animal somewhere around, and I couldn't find where this dead animal was. Of course, it was me that was dying. And I think that it turns out, as far as I'm concerned, my natural kind of kernel of self or soul has an allegiance to the ground and the rocks and the streams and the life of this earth, which started to emerge during that time. And I'd always kind of kept it, I was pretty far out in my 20s. I spent a lot of time talking to hawthorn trees and living in the hedge and things like that. But during that fast, basically everything that happened, which wasn't very dramatic, it was mostly very, very boring and uncomfortable. And if you've ever done anything like it, just the kind of churning of your own self in your own company for 4 endless fucking days. It just turned me upside down, and I felt like I was sinking deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into this ground, and observing the world around me in a way which I'd only ever really kind of experienced in, taking mushrooms as a teenager and in my 20s, but in a far, far slower kind of way, so that I could absorb what was happening. And I observed a kind of kernel truth of my nature, which I hadn't seen before. It was as if all the layers, kind of the shell layers of myself, aligned in a particular way through that emptying out, and through the discomfort, and through having to, I think, draw on the ground for support, until I could see metaphorically deep down inside myself, and basically what I think I'm here to do. And so, without questioning that too much, I've used that as a guiding star, really, for all of the 17, however many years since. And it served me pretty well. And whenever I lose track of what role I have to play in any tiny part in doing anything about the total desecration and various disasters that we're in, I go around the circle again and again and again of, I can't do anything, I have to do something, what is it that I can do? And it's despair. And I keep coming back to that moment of glimpsing, this is what you're here to do. Stay true to this. Yeah. Don't get caught up in some head notion of what usefulness might be. This is where your leverage is. Keep doing that. And so that really was my opening into poetry. It wasn't so much about land, but for me, the particular way that I am, poetry and the land has been a kind of access point to getting back into the stars as well. It's like the further I go down, eventually I've kind of come out the other side of the world, and it all gets very cosmic again, but it's a different process. It's like doing qigong or neigong or daoyin, and going into your bone marrow and discovering that the universe is in there. It's that same kind of in and through, rather than trying to get as much escape velocity as you can.
So you're rooting in now to the ground at the same time as connecting up into the stars. You're not just floating off.
Not just floating off anymore. No, I tried that. I did that. I was very good at it. And when I was going out to do that first wilderness visual, I was really on a kind of apprenticeship to become a kind of new age shaman, which I think I would have been great at that. I would have been very successful, and my soul would have at some point leapt up and strangled me, hopefully.
Yeah. So do you find that just regularly, day to day, or whenever you're out in the world, on the land, and noticing that you're on the land in those moments, is that a kind of a reconnection to that first sort of awakening you had on the 4-day fast? Do you get like a little recharge from that? Or do you just have some kind of changed relationship now with place in that way?
I think the latter, really. When I'm out on the moor or wherever I go, It's not a casting back in time. There's not that kind of reflective thing. It's more just, wow, alive, isn't this incredible? Yeah, and yeah, it fills the well, really. Yeah.
That's yeah, interesting. You phrase it like that. It's the most spectacular thing that is happening all the time, right under our feet, that most of us, most of the time, don't notice. And it's just
Oh,
the world being
yeah.
the world, right?
I totally. I mean, and I don't notice it most of the time. I stumble around blindly like a complete idiot, tripping over things and making loads of noise and going, "Oh, look, a squirrel!" And I'm definitely no stealthy tracker or anything like that. I love the world, and I hope that that's enough.
Yeah, interesting to say to bring love into it because that's been my experience. It's just been about being in love, really,
Yeah.
with the land, and and the well. It is a well. It's completely bottomless and endless, and it brings up all this nourishing life force,
Mm.
endlessly for free, you know, and completely without care about me and my small worries, but it's just gushing all the time.
I completely.
Mm.
In a lot of conversations over the last few years about hope and despair in the face of everything going on and has been going on for so long, where I've come back to again and again is this thing of being in love with, it's not just with the land, it's with life, it's with the life force, and the life force as it manifests in land is a particularly joyous, incredible thing to behold and be part of. And there's an anonymity and a smallness in relation to that, but there's also, for me, the other extreme as well of, you know, I am, we all are vitally important and connected with this great story of life unfolding on Earth, and the both of those things are happening at the same time,
Mm.
depending on where you stand, I think.
Mm. Like a sort of mycelial connection between everyone, not just everyone, but everything in all those different ways. All of life seems to connect in that way.
Well, totally. I mean, yeah, I mean, mycelial. It's such a good word, such a good image. It's kind of the image of our time, really. But I think it's this thing of belonging, in a way which, I belong to the land of East Anglia and the Waveney Valley there in a way which I know that I'll probably never belong anywhere else when I go back there. It does things to me that are kind of profound in a deep way of knowing it in my childhood. But to belong in the world, to belong as you are in life, and to feel that sense of, yeah, I am part of this, is an antidote in a way to our atomization and the complete fragmentation of almost everything that makes life sensible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
meaning. There's a crisis in meaning, isn't there? That I feel personally, I found meaning through this relationship with the living world, and it seems to be the source of all meaning to me, and is so endlessly meaningful. It fills me up all the time. So whenever I'm not kind of grounded, or I've lost my way, or I'm in crisis in some way, it's usually it's partly because I've stopped noticing the now and where I am, and I've neglected that relationship, and I'm having a more internal one. But it's about meaning. It's about loss of meaning, and and being alive is as meaningful as it needs to be. That seems to be my conclusion. That, I've been all my life. I've also been looking for these. What is the purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I here to do? Saving the world, create great art, whatever it is. But
Mhm.
but I've come to this place of now just the meaning is just to be alive and to really show up as much as I can and live as well as I can in full relationship with all this other life that's going on, and the total mystery of that as well, and not knowing what it is or ever being
Yeah,
able to is
yeah,
okay as well.
yeah.
Accepting that
I mean,
and even enjoying that.
yeah. I mean, all the kind of all the sensible traditions of the world have this sense of mystery, whether they name it as such or not. And I think in my younger years, I inherited a scientific mindset. I studied theoretical physics and maths and things like that. And I was looking for meaning. I was looking for understanding, and I was you know approaching life more in terms of a problem to be solved. What is the conundrum? What is the mysterious equation which will make sense of this
Mm.
vast, perplexing thing that I appear to be inhabiting? And I mean, now I'm not so interested in meaning, although I totally get the framing that you're putting on it there. It is the experiencing of being alive. That's the thing for me. It's just so utterly amazing to be alive. And I think for me, um, I was very depressed through most of my teens and into my 20s, and I really didn't expect to live beyond about 25. And I remember getting to 25, 26 and still being alive and actually having a much better time. But really regarding the years that have gone on since then, seriously in a way of being a gift that I didn't expect to have. And I think this is fairly common for anyone who's had any kind of disease that's threatened their life. And so, whenever I get totally dismayed and disorientated, which happens, of course, on a fairly frequent basis, I generally come back to that point of, oh my fucking God, I could not be here at all. There could be no experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There could be nothing. And yet look at all this stuff, not just the stuff of the three-dimensional world, but there's all these emotions, there's all these feelings and sensations and complex dichotomies and paradoxes of self and other, and there's love, and there's these beings out there, and all of it, and the stars. I mean, Jesus, it's extraordinary. There's so much, and to just stop and contrast that with, okay, oneness would be, it's got a lot going for it, but the 10,000 things. Wow, what a story. What a story.
Yeah, all of that.
It's a show. Right? It's a great show.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's almost like it's the collapsing of everything into, when you talked about it not being about meaning but experiencing. To me, I think meaning is experiencing. It's like the two have just become one thing.
Sure.
And it's that that is it. I mean, we reach that point where language ends, basically, don't we? Where, we try through poems to kind of go a rung or two higher, but we're really wasting our time. But
I'm a poet, so I disagree. I don't think we're wasting our time.
Okay, no, maybe that's a bit harsh.
we
reach.
Totally. We have to keep reaching, and the stepping stones that we put down, or the ladders in the air, or the steps we carve, or whatever, even if they don't take us to those places through the words, we're kind of doing this triangulation. It's like, okay, if you carry on in this way, then there's something amazing waiting there. And just kind of this thing of how do we approach the mystery or the mysteries or all the goodness through language, with this awareness that you say of language can't actually encapsulate it. That's my that's my really juicy stuff. That's what I love. And when there is essentially just the grace that happens with words, then it reminds me again and again that that words can do something extraordinary, and that we're not limited to the kind of conveyor belt of language.
Yeah, and do you get the sense of, because it feels to me like when a poem is coming through and it's one that's worth stopping whatever you're doing to take notice of, that in those moments it's like that is the edge of the mycelium kind of growing out a bit, and something, it's also an interface, it's like the meeting of this mysterious thing, whatever it is, with my own personal experience and everything I'm in, the context I'm in.
Yeah,
And somehow, all the cliches are there. It is like a sort of pipeline or a conduit, or because there's no sense of me in that writing it. My me comes into it later on, where I kind of knock about the pieces that were dropped through, but
sure.
they or flow. It's more like a river. I experience it more like it's just like the tap gets switched on and the river starts flowing. And if I've got any awareness in that moment or any sense, I get the fuck out of the way and just let as much through as possible before, inevitably the little ego steps in and goes, I'm a poet, I can do, shit, it's gone.
Uh-huh.
But how do you experience those moments of what I would call like transmission or receiving or inspiration? How does it happen for you?
Well, first, I think there are different kinds of things that happen. It's not all one thing, to speak about poetry and writing poetry. We're covering a lot of different territories just by saying those words. But the kind of experience that you're talking about, for me, the image I have is one that the poet William Stafford describes really well, this notion of a thread that you follow. And there are all these things trying to happen to push you off the thread, or temptations to kind of step off the thread and go over there. And so in that writing, it's like the wafting, waving, dangling thread appears in front of me with some words on it. Yeah, obviously this is all kind of internal metaphor. And if I pay attention, and yeah, it's all about attention and focus, I can get those words down and follow the thread, and there are words that come on that thread. And meditation practice, if I've got anything from that down the years of my extensively shit meditation focus, it is the ability to follow this thread fairly well wherever it will take me. And there are skills to do with that, which I'm still trying to figure out what they are and how to name them, and how to hopefully kind of help other people cultivate them. But it is this thing of just follow the thread, keep on following the thread. It will take you somewhere. It has its own length. It has its own place that it's going. And if you trust and your attention is strong enough, and your tongue or your internal tongue is dexterous enough to be able to articulate what is appearing in that thread, then you won't stumble and fall off it. So the practice of being comfortable with language, serves as well as you're going along that thread. So having the availability of words as something that you're very, very comfortable with helps. That particular thing. There are other things, other ways of approaching poetry, obviously, and other ways of approaching this particular moment. But that's how it works for me. And so it's this loyalty to where the thread is going and the trust. Yeah. And the same thing of keeping all my cleverness out of the way. Yeah.
And so, in the initial moments, though, do you go looking for it? Do you have a sort of method of that, or is
No.
it a receiving? Is it a Or do you get
It's an
yourself into a place or a state where it's more likely that it can
yeah.
come?
I drum for 15 hours, take 250 Liberty Caps, and and fast for 7 days and do my Dzogchen. No. I've got two small kids.
Morrison's Pizza does it for me.
Yeah, completely. Guinness also works as quite well. Other stouts are available. The it's so for me it's an arising. Yeah. There's I have a rich and active interior world which goes on all the time. That like most of us, it ticks over and does its own thing. And every so often a wave will come up and there'll be some words there. And again, if I've got any skill as a poet, it's recognizing when the wave brings up something that is worth following and when it's just bringing up flotsam and jetsam. It's so a sentence or a few words will come up and I'm like, yeah, that's got the taste, that's got the smell, I'm in, let's go. And if I'm lucky, then actually I have the space and time to do that. And if I don't, these days I'll record it and go back to it to see if the thread is still there. And it's not always there, but sometimes it is. And that's a really beautiful and mysterious thing to me, that the way the thread lies doesn't change. It's like it exists.
And then, so when you've gone on the writing journey and you have something that you might call a poem at the end of it, what's your kind of feeling, or what's your experience of what to do next with that? Are you
Yeah.
because this is something that came up only recently, relatively in the last few years for me, because I've been writing poems for a long time, but I'd never performed them or read them out loud, which of course seems absurd now because it seems to me like that's the whole point of a poem, is that it's spoken. How do what's your experience of that, or what do you think about
Um, so again, there are different kinds of poems. Some poems do seem to have more of the page about them, and some of them are about speaking. I'm a storyteller. I'm a showman and a performer. I love the sound of language and what happens when you speak words of truth and power in the presence of place and other people, and what happens there. That's a total fascination and part of what I'm most interested in. But there are other poems that are just stay on the page as that kind of thing as well. So it depends on the poem. And so at the moment, for example, I'm working in a number of different ways. There's a collection that I'm editing and still writing pieces for, called The Queen of Heaven, which has been going on for quite a while and is nearing completion. And those ones I'm holding really close to my chest. They are kind of big pieces that I really, really want to get right. I want to keep feeling as I read through them and speak them out loud for the snag points and like, that word, no, wrong, that syllable doesn't work, come on, let's get back to the rhythm, what's going on here, or I strayed from the truth there when I was trying to be impressive, or all of the things that can go wrong. So those ones, there's this kind of, that's me deep in the kind of underbelly of the mountain at my forge, working away with my hammer night after night or morning after morning. And then there's these other ones, which is interesting at the moment. So other ones where, I'll be up late at night or early in the morning and a thread comes and I follow it. And this one particularly, this particular poem or that particular poem says, okay, work's done, get it out there. So there's several different things going on, and those ones, I'll go through a couple of times, feel it, edit it a little, just kind of where find out where I went awry, where the arrow didn't fall true, and then I'll put them out on Facebook, and I'll put them out on Instagram, and I'll put them out in my newsletter, and maybe put them up on my website, because what I'm beginning to understand is that there's at least two threads. There are many more threads, but the two main threads that I'm interested in at the moment are this kind of deep alchemical work of those poems that I'm keeping close to my chest. But that's not enough. There's an active component to the writing and the work I'm doing with words, which is much more about service. And that aspect requires people to actually read the poems. And so, those ones I put out into the world, and if they have a beneficial effect for someone who reads them, then glory be. That's the work. So they fall into broadly those two categories, and then other ones that I write and sit around for years before I do anything with them, or just fill up my hard drive.
So you say a beneficial effect. Is that your intention then with putting a poem out? Is that it does good?
Intention isn't quite the right word, but it's my belief that part of the part of my job is to speak truth about things which are difficult to articulate, or which are not usually articulated. And I have a faith that when that happens, when you speak truth in a particular way that is touched with grace of some kind, then the image I have for that is that the fibres of reality start to sing in a particular way. And when people read those words, then the fibres in their space and in their reality, they start to sing as well, and that can have a beneficial effect on them. That's kind of the image I have. So it's using words as a vehicle to travel across space and time to have that effect. And what that effect might be is different for everyone. I'm not trying to do good with the words, or to kind of do healing or anything like that, but it's this faith I have. And it's the same with storytelling, that when stories are told in a particular way, and when the stars align and everything happens, then you can feel this thrumming of reality that happens in the sphere of the storytelling, and that is healing. That does its thing. And so my job is not to try and heal people, or to provoke, or to initiate some healing crisis or anything like that. It's to make those fibers sing as best I can, using the skills I've got and the grace that I sometimes have access to.
Yeah, so kind of energy, well, I would call it love myself. It's like generating love in a way. I mean, that's my interpretation of your fibers. But
yeah. I mean, at the bottom, it's all about love. Love has active love has many different disguises and faces and ways of radiating and being transmitted. But part of coming back to being in love with the world, part of that being in love with the world is to try and help it sing. Yeah.
So the alchemical bit then, the other work that you said was more alchemical, are you talking about work that's going on inside you, on yourself then?
Why is it alchemical? Maybe it's not particularly alchemical, but it feels, when I'm working on it, I feel more like an alchemist. I suppose that's the truth of it. So
because it's so fucking hard, and you're never gonna get there.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a fool's errand. No, I think it's just this really, really close work. I feel like I'm crouched over, some precious liquid that I'm or precious elements that I'm trying to do something with in kind of internal consciousness, so that they make the right transitions and shapes and transmute and do this kind of thing. So it's I'll stick to alchemical in that sense. Yeah. but I suppose what it really is more kind of, in a way, more hermetic. Maybe it's kind of it's solitary and hard. Yes.
But is there a
No, no
great,
one understands.
no, is there
Very
a
difficult.
great satisfaction in that for you though, just as a personal kind of
Oh, oh yeah.
inspiration, or do you think it's maybe like taking care of your tools? You know, like the craftsman might go and spend a few hours sharpening his edge tools. Does it
Oh,
have that?
completely.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's you know, without getting too grandiose about it, it's that thing of seeing a material, seeing a piece of wood or a lump of stone, and having the vision of what might be, and through art and craft and grace, being able to make that happen. Can there be any greater satisfaction for an artist or craftsperson? You know, that's the thing. So yeah,
Mm.
that moment of, yes, this is done to the best of my ability, and it contains some song in it that is at least a kind of vague fragment of what I thought I heard when it started. That's it's extraordinary.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, that's the sort of easy part of life. Then the poetry. What about the more challenging bit of being a parent?
Do you find that challenging, Tim?
Probably the most difficult thing I've ever found
Oh,
myself unwittingly involved.
without a doubt, the most difficult and challenging and ever changing um, thing. I mean, where should we even start? Um, you know,
How
the
old are your kids? How old are your kids?
okay, yeah, I've got two boys. One will be 3 in December, and the other will be 7 in February.
All right.
They are wild forces, firebrands. They're alive in just extraordinary ways, very different and very similar. Yeah, they're amazing. And I co-parent with Rima, so have the boys half the time, roughly half the time here, and she has them there. I live just a couple of 100 yards away from her place in the same village, and so that's a whole other adventure in itself, for sure, which I'm not going to talk too much about here. Um, but you know, if anything has ever highlighted to me the brokenness of the village, the tribe, the structure of sane society that supports parents and children to grow in the best ways, becoming a parent was, you know, it's a masterclass in, hey, look, this is something that could be utterly beautiful, and it's fucked. You're gonna struggle again and again and again because there isn't enough support, and there isn't enough knowledge, and there isn't enough wisdom, and there aren't enough resources. But do the best you can, and try and have a creative life, and some kind of relationship, and exist in the loaded game of late stage capitalism with any kind of grace. Here you go.
Well, no, but there you have it. You've really touched on what's at the heart of the experience of being a parent for probably anyone listening who's living in the West, at least.
Yeah.
Just you can't do it as a couple or as a single person. You
No.
simply can't do it, and it's excruciating and traumatic for everybody involved because it needs the village, as you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, we're very, very lucky here. This village is an extraordinary place where there are a lot of children, a lot of families, all very close by, and especially for a number of reasons, we've been through various adversities in the last few years. And you know, one of the things I've learned in that is that those adversities are how we make community. But having people show up all around, and having the kids around for our kids to play with and places for them to go and all of this kind of stuff, that has been eye-opening and humbling, and has changed my kind of criteria, I suppose, for good living. Like a lot of us, I've had my notions of what community might look like, and kind of imagined my kind of dream house in a kind of nice cob roundhouse, in some eco village, and all of this kind of stuff. Now I know that for me, at least, those things are just trappings. I mean, they're nice stuff. That would be great. It's all about the people, all about the people, more than it is even about land. It's great that here we are, we're surrounded by fields and hills and forests and all of that. But if you don't have good people, it doesn't mean shit, really, in the end, unless you're wanting to raise Parsifal. And I don't. Living up on the moor when our oldest was, coming up to about 3 years old, living in the middle of nowhere, and we had to drive, half an hour to just really see anyone. And it was like, this isn't going to work. Not only is it just going to be too hard, but he's not going to have that beautiful experience of interweaving with children of different ages and being in and out of other people's houses and all that kind of thing. And that, to me, is the beauty now, seeing that happen.
So
but it's also the most profoundly extraordinary and wonderful experience. Of course, it's easy to dwell on the hardship and brokenness of it, because it is so difficult and so profound. But I'm just in complete awe of the miracle of seeing these beings develop in their particular ways. And I'm really interested in love. It's kind of everything to me. But to the particular love that I have for these boys, I never knew that love existed before. And so to be able to experience that in their company, even though they are totally wild and crazy and like living with forces of nature, it's like living with Puck, half the time. It really is, especially our youngest at the moment. It's quite something. In the midst of all that, to just behold them and go, wow, life force. This is the life force here, springing up, gushing all over my life. And I'm trying to get their teeth brushed and their clothes on to go somewhere. And it's so easy to forget that as well. And I do a lot. So I'm reminding myself here.
yeah, the wildness is still there, isn't it? The younger they are, the more of it is in there, and it's such a force. It's so powerful. I remember being astounded at how two things, how made they were from the start in who they were. They showed up as themselves
Yeah.
from day one, and that blew my mind. I couldn't quite believe that. They were so clearly themselves, and at the same time, so powerful, so just life force, like big, so big for such small people.
Yeah, that's the one. How old are your kids?
Well, they're now, Grace is 13 and Lila is now 7. So I've got two girls. I've gone the other track. Yeah. I mean, I often wonder what it would have been like to go the boy way. I mean, it will probably be easier for me, but perhaps not what I needed, Because
Who knows?
girls,
Who knows?
are born they're lawyers from day one. They're clever, and they're clever from the beginning. And I knew I would already lost my case from as soon as they came, it was all over.
yeah, totally. I have that as well, though. I have that as well. I don't stand a chance. I need to build my strength and resilience, because as these boys grow, I'm lost.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, they get. Yeah, I mean, I know you probably don't want to go into it too much, but I just want to say a little bit about the unexpected benefit of having, because I've got a similar situation. I've got the kids half the week, and then they're with Red the other half the week,
Hmm.
and it's worked out so well for us that because of who
Ah.
we are and both needing that solitary time, I feel even though obviously there are challenges with them going
Hmm.
between, but it really it means we can be the best that we can be. I feel, and
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
was something I hadn't expected at all, and I'm
For
really
sure.
grateful that that worked out. If you know if
Ah.
as long as you have that kind of thread of good communication and you're working together,
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
that's been amazing for us.
Yeah. So I mean, Rima's an extraordinary being, and I'm doing my best. So we're doing what we can. It's all a little too fresh to speak about in any kind of meaningful or
Always will
meaningful
be.
way. But what's that?
I say always will be, I think.
But definitely, there's a particular challenge in being two creative people raising kids. You know, it's another life, it's another loyalty that you're locked into, and you've faced some difficult choices of, okay, you're going to put this down until the kids are older, or you're going to try and forego a certain amount of sleep for this, or try and multitask, which works so well with small kids, um, for raising your stress levels. You know, so it's hard in a situation which is already hard, for almost all of us. Um, but yeah, I mean, the miraculous thing is that, even with all the stuff that goes on in the world and all the ways that the game is loaded against bringing up kids in any kind of good way, I look around and see the kids that are growing up now, that I come across, and they are fucking extraordinary.
Mm.
You know, they know stuff that I didn't know until I was 30. You know, they're growing up. Certainly, the ones I am lucky enough to meet, they're growing up wise and caring and kind and savvy, and yeah, you know, they've got some challenges ahead for sure. These crazy times, but uh, yeah, it's something to behold.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that. It's been exactly my experience. Like it's like they're built for the times, yeah. They're landing, they land and they're ready. Because we ran part of our journey with the kids was we set up and ran a parent and child group for for about 7 or 8 years, I think it was in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Partly just to make something happen for our children because we're quite rural here. Um, but the kids that I met doing that, I was so I thought my two were incredible, but you always your lens is pretty distorted, isn't it, as a parent? But I all of those kids that I met were amazing people
Yeah,
and really powerful. That's the word I would use. Powerful people,
yeah.
and it gave me a lot of um, there was a lot of sort of solace and feeling of we're all right because these people being born now are so ready for this, whatever's coming.
Mm-hmm.
I did feel some sense of relief in that, like they're gonna be all right because they're amazing. And like you say,
Yeah.
they seem to have awarenesses and capabilities and just all kinds of attributes that I don't remember having any of that stuff. I don't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
have most of it now.
I
So
know. We're dinosaurs, Tim.
yeah, yeah. Plodding around,
Saying our
the
clever stuff,
carpets are
doing our
falling
thing,
blue.
and the kids are just rolling their eyes and getting on with it. Um, yeah, I don't know whether I agree fully with, that they're made for these times, or that they're going to be okay. Um, but I hear what you're saying, and I agree with it to a certain extent.
Yeah, no, I've shifted on all of that. I feel like just how weird and how absurd it's all got. It's become a great sort of indicator to me that what I couldn't imagine ever happening was this all kind of falling apart into something else. And I sense it's going to get pretty messy, but there's just such a strong sense of something growing through it that's so vital.
Yeah.
Even though it's small, it's so vital because it's just the life force.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incorruptible and seems to be, endlessly able to regenerate and reform and shapeshift and
For sure.
strong. It doesn't matter what I've seen us do. The soil is strong, and in the right circumstances, it comes back quick.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all so it's almost pointless to talk about because who the fuck knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. But they're like strong wildflowers. They're growing already in kind of essentially waste ground, and they're coming up stronger for that, because that's the ecosystem that they're arising in. Yeah, and who knows, like you say. Yeah, one thing that I do know is that all my notions of what might happen in the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years are notions. And I try not to get too fixed on that.
Absolutely. No, giving up all of that kind of pointless waste of energy, for sure. It's the moment is where it's at, and if I can get there as much as possible, I think that's probably where I'll do my most useful work for kids, for myself, and anyone else around.
Yeah, yeah. And like I say, I'm holding on to that notion of that glimpse of this is what you're here to do, and I thrash around in all the existential stuff like the rest of us of what and how, and especially as a parent, what am I preparing my kids for? How can I, Rima and me, prepare them as best we can for the things that might come? And in that context, at least, what I come down to again and again and again is getting along with people and the skills, interpersonal skills, because whatever's going to happen, the ability to be around people, make peace, and communicate truth is going to be vital. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. That seems like a very good place to press pause to me, because
I reckon.
that sentiment really captures it. Cool. Well, thank you so much for that. That was an interesting ramble.
My pleasure, Tim. Really lovely to speak with you. Thank you for taking us into interesting places.
Cool.